My name is Thomas Grayson. I'm 54 years old, and I've been the senior operations officer at Fort Shield Airbase longer than some of our pilots have been alive. At this hour, when the hangars sleep and the runways go silent, I sit alone in a room filled with the kind of hum that settles into your bones. The command center's lights flicker just enough to make you think twice before blinking. A wall of monitors glows soft blue, each one showing just enough chaos to remind me why I'm still here. The coffee in my mug tastes like cardboard soaked in gasoline, but it's warm and that's enough. The air smells like fried circuits and yesterday's sweat. Somewhere, a cooling unit kicks in, its low thrum like a heartbeat under the floor. I adjust my chair without thinking. After all these years, I still know which lever sticks. This is the part no one sees. Not the ceremonies. Not the ribbons. Not the photo ops with polished boots and crisp salutes. It's here, in this dim blue light, where real work lives, where bad weather reroutes missions, and a failed sensor means a jet doesn't leave the ground. I've been running this skeleton for over 2 decades. Before the digital dashboards and the contractors with buzzwords, we had terminals that ran hot and code you had to coax like an old dog. I stayed because I could talk to the system. Because I listened when others wanted to replace what they didn't understand. People say the backbone of the base is steel and discipline. They're wrong. It's code, redundancies, the quiet margin between readiness and chaos. And I'm the one who keeps it aligned, calibrated, humming beneath the noise. Nobody really knows my name outside this room. They call the base commander when something breaks. They call logistics when supplies run late. But when a fleet's ready before dawn or a disaster's rerouted without a headline, that's me. I don't need a medal, I just need things to work. That's the deal I made with myself the day I took this chair. I've missed birthdays, skipped funerals, eaten more vending machine dinners than I can count, but every system I've held together kept someone alive. That matters. There's a small crack in the screen near monitor 7. I traced it with my finger once during a hurricane drill and never fixed it. It reminds me nothing is ever perfect. You just keep going. I know the logic chains like I know my own heartbeat. Which line controls fuel sequencing? Which failsafe resets gate clearances without disrupting security checks? None of it's glamorous. But without it, planes don't land and people don't come home. Tonight's quiet, too quiet. And I know what that means. It means change is coming. New faces, new tools. People who think simplicity means better. But they haven't seen what I've seen when systems fail. There's comfort in the silence of this place. It's not peaceful exactly, but it's familiar. The blinking cursor on my console. The slow blink of the tower handoff lights. It all moves because I move it. I take a sip of coffee and glance at the roster. 2 supply runs. 1 medevac prepped for 0400. I've already rerouted the inbound convoy to avoid the flooded access road. No one asked. No one had to. Because I still care. Even when they don't see me. Even when the only thank you is that none of the alerts go red. My name is Thomas Grayson. I'm the one who keeps this place from falling apart. And I do it quietly. Because someone has to. It was barely past 7 when they walked into ops like they owned the place. Captain Trevor Lutz and his fiancée, Madison Brooks. He had the kind of jawline that made you wonder if it was issued with his uniform, and she wore heels that had never seen a hangar floor. Trevor shook my hand with a grip just firm enough to suggest he'd read about leadership in a paperback. Madison didn't bother. She was already tapping away on a tablet, so knew I'm surprised it didn't come with a warning label. They introduced themselves like a mission briefing. Captain Lutz, Civilian Logistics Strategist, Future Forward Solutions, Real-Time Transformation. I stopped listening around the second buzzword. He gestured to the console I'd been running since he was in high school and said something about integrating predictive flow analytics. Madison chimed in with a line about visual metrics driving efficiency. Her voice was light, rehearsed, like a TED Talk no one asked for. I pointed at the screen and warned them both. If you mess with this interface, you'll reroute fuel to a grounded drone in Sector 9. Neither of them blinked. Trevor smiled like I was the one who didn't get it. "This is what progress looks like," he said. "I've seen that smile before. It's the one you use when you're already planning to gut the place." They were here to modernize. That's what the base commander said, like he was handing them a pair of scissors and telling them to snip the wires holding everything together. Madison asked about automated contingency modeling. I told her the system already has human-flagged overrides for high-impact delays. She smiled like I'd confirmed her theory and went back to her screen. That was the moment I knew. They weren't here to learn. They were here to replace. Every word they spoke was polished, but not one of them landed in the dirt where real decisions are made. They talked over me, around me, never to me. Like the system didn't matter, like I didn't. Trevor said this place was stuck in legacy thinking, that we needed a new operating vision. Funny thing about vision, it's not much use when you can't tell which end of the machine is leaking. I stood there, in the same seat I'd held through war games and wildfires, and watched them act like I was background noise. That's when I felt it. Not anger. Not yet. Just a shift. Like the floor had tilted half a degree. Like something was coming, and I was already standing in its shadow. Madison's first big idea was to cut redundancies. She said we were wasting manpower tracking the same inventory at multiple checkpoints. I told her those backups were the only reason we didn't lose a supply convoy during the last blackout. She smiled like she was humoring a child and pivoted to dispatch flow. Said we needed to streamline. Her exact words were too many hands on the wheel. I pointed out that one of those hands caught a corrupted routing last month, before it diverted 3 fuel trucks to an unmanned sector. She called it anecdotal. I called it experience. The changes came fast after that. Color-coded dashboards, automated order triggers, visual load balances tied to algorithmic forecasts. I tried to explain that ops isn't a spreadsheet. Planes don't wait politely, storms don't follow models, and a glitch in one node can ripple through 20 missions. She didn't care. Said the old ways were slow and defensive. That we needed a proactive culture. I showed her how we test emergency comms in silence, so we don't jam priority channels. She said we should add audio cues to make it more intuitive. When I pushed back, she didn't argue. She just tilted her head and said I sounded fearful. That fear breeds friction. Captain Lutz backed her, of course. Said it was time to evolve. That the chain of command had to make room for cross-functional vision. What he meant was, we're moving forward with or without you. I went home that night with a knot in my chest. I wasn't angry, not really. Just tired. Tired of explaining the same thing to people who already made up their minds. They held another strategy session without me the next morning. When I walked in, they paused, but not out of respect. Out of annoyance. Madison looked up from her tablet and said they were simplifying our routing protocols. I asked who would review the changes for security conflicts. She said the new system didn't need manual checks anymore. That's when I raised my voice. Just a little. Told them they were building a castle on a fault line. Madison didn't flinch. She tapped her screen once, then looked right at me. Your mindset is hurting the culture. She said it like a mantra, like it excused every short-sighted decision that came before and after. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. It happened on a Thursday. No dramatic showdown. No raised voices. Just silence. Madison had reassigned the last of my night support crew. Said the new system didn't require overnight human oversight. I wasn't even in the room when the decision was made. That was when I knew. I wasn't part of the plan anymore. Not as a mentor. Not as a safeguard. Not even as a name on a shift calendar. The next morning, my keycard access to 3 terminal stacks was quietly revoked. No explanation. No mistake. Just a quiet line in the sand. I sat in my usual chair, stared at the monitors. They were running fine. That was the problem. My scripts were still holding everything together. My logic trees, my redundancy filters, my custom interfaces, and they didn't even know. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. I had built something they never learned to see. Something that let them believe their dashboards and metrics were actually working. I opened a secured directory under my profile and began to archive 3,200 lines of custom script, code that adjusted delays for fuel weight, rerouted inbound loads in weather lockout, smooth transitions during tower handoffs, all of it mine. Not officially, but effectively. I found the memo I'd bookmarked years ago. A 2014 military policy brief buried under a logistics update. It clearly stated that unless formally transferred, any personnel-created workflow tool remained property of the author. No transfer review, no claim. That was my lock. And my key. I encrypted the entire batch and tied it to my authenticated session. While I was active, the system would keep humming. If I logged out, it would revert to factory logic. The original codebase couldn't recognize new airframe data, couldn't differentiate tactical lift from medical evac, couldn't even reroute around a closed tarmac. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because they needed to see. I closed the directory and backed up everything to a private drive. Then I sat back and let the room go quiet again. The hum was still there, same as always. But something had shifted. For years, I had been the ghost in the machine, not just keeping things running, but keeping them from collapsing. They never noticed the fires I put out before they started. That was the point. But now the silence felt different. Not earned, not respected, just convenient. I ran one last systems test under my credentials. Everything passed. Smooth, seamless, invisible. And then I logged out. No alarms. No red lights, just a blinking cursor, waiting for someone who knew what it meant. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because I felt vindicated, but because I knew gravity would do the rest. They had pushed me out. Now they could fly solo, and I knew exactly what kind of landing they were headed for. The cursor blinked once, then disappeared. That was it. No alarms, no error tones. Just the clean silence of a system waiting for input that would never come. I closed the lid of my laptop and leaned back in my chair. The walls of my apartment felt thinner that day. Maybe it was just the quiet, or maybe it was the knowing. The kind of knowing you don't feel in your bones, but behind your ribs, under the breath. It started slow. A delay in medical evac dispatch from Outpost 17, then a failed handoff in the drone corridor near the Western Range. By 1600 hours, flight reroutes were stacking up like dominoes, all wrong. My phone buzzed. Marty, from Tactical Ops, sent a message in all caps, 3 airframes circling with no assigned landing priority. Medical supplies stuck on the tarmac, cooling units timing out. Then came the news alerts. Civilian contractors reporting grounded transports. Field units pinging back incomplete manifests. A fuel truck ended up on the wrong grid entirely. I sat by the window, coffee gone cold in my hand, and watched the sky darken. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. This wasn't justice. This was just the weight of bad choices landing where they were always going to land. Someone had pulled my name from the org chart, erased the code tags without asking what they were tied to. And now the machine was coughing up sparks. On the base's digital dashboard, half the icons turned red before dinner. The rest blinked amber like warning lights no one knew how to read. Marty messaged again. You see this mess? You watching this unfold? I didn't answer. One by one, flights were grounded. Critical dispatches missed their load windows. Soldiers sat in field stations waiting for parts that were never scanned, never ordered. I clicked through the alerts like reading a story I'd already memorized. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about inevitability. You can't cut the spine out of a body and expect it to stand. They had called it modernization, efficiency, cultural realignment. Now it was just failure, pure and simple. I thought about Madison and Trevor sitting in a conference room, staring at screens that looked fine, but meant nothing. I imagined them refreshing dashboards that couldn't speak the truth. The truth was in the dirt, in the movement of gears and timing of hands, and the gut instinct of someone who'd seen too many near misses to play with theory. The chaos wasn't satisfying. It was sad, but it was necessary. And it wasn't over. The first call came from base command, a clipped voice trying hard to stay professional, but I could hear the panic under the surface. They wanted to know if I could step in, just temporarily, just until the system stabilized. I didn't respond. I let it ring out. The second call came from the logistics chief. He offered to roll back everything, to reinstate my full clearance, said it was all a misunderstanding. I sipped my coffee and looked out the window. By the time the Pentagon liaison reached out, it wasn't a request anymore. It was begging wrapped in protocol. They promised whatever I wanted. Position, autonomy, back pay, even said Trevor would be removed immediately. I answered that one. Not to negotiate, just to say no. I told them I hadn't sabotaged anything. I followed policy. I removed personal tools that were never formally transferred. The system broke itself. There was a pause on the line, a long one. I let it hang. Then the general spoke. He asked what it would take. He said lives were on the line, reputations, careers. I said quietly that all of those things mattered yesterday too. When no one listened, he offered a blank check. I declined, not because I was angry, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew that fixing it now would only delay the next collapse. They'd forget again. They always do. I didn't need to be the patch anymore. I told them I walked out with clean hands. I didn't pull the plug. I just stopped holding up the roof. There was no shouting, no threats, just silence on their end and peace on mine. I ended the call, set my phone down, and felt the quiet settle again. For the first time, I wasn't carrying their failure. It was theirs to own, and mine to leave behind. 3 weeks after I walked out, I signed a quiet contract with a nonprofit that supports veteran logistics. Nothing fancy. No committees, no performance reviews, just systems that needed fixing, and people who understood what mattered. My mornings started slower. No buzzers, no alarms, just the sound of birds and the clink of a real coffee mug. The kind with weight in your hand and warmth that doesn't fade too fast. I bought a used 22-foot boat from a guy named Dennis who smelled like salt and lived with 3 cats on shore. The name on the stern was half peeled off. I repainted it myself. Failsafe. It wasn't about irony. It was about remembering that some things need to work because lives depend on it, not because someone's trying to hit a metric on a chart. The rule was simple: no military talk on the water. Out there, it was weather, sandwiches, and whatever the sky decided to do. Some days it rained sideways and we came in soaked. Other days the air was so still it felt like the sea was holding its breath. I took Marty out one Saturday. He didn't say much at first. Then, 2 beers in, he told me he'd put in his notice, said he was tired of apologizing for knowing how things work. I gave him Daniel Cho's contact, said nothing more. He understood. A few more calls came in after that. Quiet check-ins, requests for advice. I didn't mind. I gave what I could, pointed a few toward roles that would treat them better. It felt good to help, not out of duty, out of choice. On land, I rewrote old code with the windows open. The air smelled like cut grass and rain-soaked dirt. Some days, I forgot what day it was. That was the point. I went to sleep without thinking about alerts. I woke up without wondering who screwed up the fuel manifest. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe anymore. For the first time in a long time, I was just a man in a quiet room with a job he chose. And that was enough. When people asked what I did now, I kept it simple. I help people who help people. It wasn't flashy, but it felt clean. And some nights, on the back of that boat with the sun dropping low, I looked out at the water and felt a kind of stillness I thought I'd lost for good. Turns out, peace doesn't always roar in. Sometimes, it just drifts back when you stop chasing the storm. I've had a lot of quiet time to think since leaving the base. Long walks, slow coffee, days without a single voice telling me how I need to change. What sticks with me most isn't the chaos or the headlines. It's how fast people forget the value of what works until it stops working. Competence isn't loud. It doesn't wear a badge or ask for applause. But when it's gone, the silence gets expensive. I don't blame them anymore. Not really. But I've learned not to stay where my voice is treated like noise instead of signal. Sometimes, walking away isn't quitting. It's choosing yourself. Respect is a two-way street. When they take yours off the table, you're allowed to take your skill set with you. That's not sabotage. That's self-respect. I didn't burn anything down. I just stopped holding it up. If a structure falls after that, maybe it wasn't built right in the first place. There's a difference between being a team player and being someone they depend on while pretending they don't. I say this now for anyone feeling invisible in the middle of their own storm. You are not as replaceable as they act. Hold your line. Do your work with pride. But don't lose yourself trying to prove what they refuse to see. The hardest thing I ever did was let go. But it's also the thing that brought me peace. And here's what I've found on the other side. The world doesn't fall apart without you. But sometimes, the part that does was never yours to carry in the first place. So, take stock. Trust your worth. And when the moment comes, don't be afraid to let gravity do what it does. Because respect doesn't start with them. It starts with you. That's what I've come to believe. And now I wonder, what would happen if more of us stopped pretending broken systems are our fault to fix?